Hello, my name is Lizzie Bayman. I'm one of the consultants with the Diabetes Out There team in Tayside. We've produced two videos on the use of flash glucose monitoring. This one is part one, and I would recommend that you watch this one before moving on to part two. The things which I am hoping to cover in this presentation are firstly, a little bit about understanding how flash glucose scanning works. We'll go on and discuss some of the pros and cons of using flash glucose scanning to monitor yours or your child's glucose readings. We'll talk about how to apply sensors and deal with skin reactions should they occur. And then lastly, we're going to talk through how to set up all of the accounts which you need to do so in order to share your data with the diabetes team. This allows us to remotely review your data and help you to make decisions about any adjustments which may be necessary to your insulin. An important concept to understand when using flash glucose sensing is that the system is not measuring a blood glucose, but in fact is sitting within the interstitial space. That is the space between all of the cells of the body. And you can see that in the diagram there. There's a tiny plastic cannula which sits under the skin in the interstitial space. The cannula is attached to the sensor itself, and then the white overlay is the transmitter, which is used to communicate the data to either a phone or the Libre handset. It's important to understand this because interstitial glucose is not the same as blood glucose. It changes a little bit more slowly. So therefore, if you or your child's blood glucose is in a state of flux, there will be a time lag before that is detected on the interstitial reading. As you can see from the graph on the right-hand side of the slide, blood glucose is represented by the blue line and interstitial glucose by the red line. The manufacturers of Libre 2 say that the time lag between blood and interstitial glucose is around 2 minutes. In practice, we sometimes find it's a little bit longer, and we advise families to expect a time lag of around 5 minutes. There are three different components to the Freestyle Libre 2 system. First of all, there is the applicator, which is used to insert the sensor into the back of the arm. The sensor itself, of course, is shown in the second picture, and then the reader could be either a smartphone or the Libre 2 handset, which can be provided to you by Abbott. Here are some of the advantages of using flash glucose scanning. First and foremost, if you scan frequently enough, and in this case it's every 8 hours or more frequently, then the system will collect continuous retrospective data. That means it will tell you what's been happening with your interstitial glucose readings for the 8 hours preceding when you have done your scan. This can be particularly useful to look at what's been happening to your child's glucose readings overnight during a period of sleep, also after eating, and when they are maybe participating in sports and exercise. If your child or yourself are not fans of doing finger prick readings, and that would be very understandable, then the system does allow you to reduce the number of finger pricks that you have to do each day. We'll also come on a little bit later to talk about trend arrows. Trend arrows give you an indication of how quickly your glucose is rising or falling, and this can allow you to intervene at an earlier stage to try and prevent hypo or hyperglycemia occurring. The last advantage is that the Libre 2 system, the updated version, allows you to use alarms in order to alert you to the fact that your reading is low or high. And this can be helpful during day-to-day life for the child or young person themselves, but is particularly helpful for those using the follow-on app to allow them to have an oversight of what might be happening when their child is separated from them. Flash glucose scanning isn't a perfect system, and I'm sorry to say it doesn't really take away any of the time you spend day to day in looking after your diabetes. The system only works really for those users who interact with it regularly and scan regularly. If you have gaps of more than 8 hours between scanning, then you'll miss out on that opportunity to collect continuous data because there will be some information missing. Some families can find the time lag between the interstitial glucose reading and the blood glucose reading to be confusing and frustrating. This can be particularly a problem in the extreme ranges because the manufacturers of Libre 2 say that it's less accurate in the hypoglycemia range and in the hyperglycemia range. Although the continuous data can be very useful, some users may find that it's just overwhelming to be presented with so much information about what's happening day to day with glucose readings, and that can feel overwhelming, and some people just don't like to use it for that reason. And if you're like that, then that's absolutely fine. Another limitation is that Libre sensors cannot be submerged in water for more than 30 minutes. And this might be a limitation for families, for example, who spend a long time in the swimming pool each day. Lastly, the sensors themselves can be affected by lots of external influences, for example, the temperature, whether or not they've been knocked during sports or dressing, whether the child has been unwell and dehydrated, or taking particular medications. So there are some situations where the sensor is less accurate, and we just need to be aware of those if you're relying on this information during these circumstances. There are several circumstances where we would recommend that you check a finger prick blood glucose reading. Most of these are also reinforced by Abbott, the manufacturers of Libre. Firstly, we recognise that the sensors are less accurate at the extremes of glucose readings. So if the scanned reading is less than 4, then it's essential that a finger prick is also undertaken to show whether or not your child is in fact hypoglycemic. The same applies if the scanned reading is above 14. If you do a scan on your child and you think that number just really does not make sense because of the situation you're in at the time, then we would recommend checking a finger prick blood glucose reading. If your child is looking or acting like they're hypoglycemic, or if they are able to communicate to you that they feel hypoglycemic, but their scanned reading is okay, then we would still recommend doing a finger prick test for safety. Finally, as we'll discuss later, the scanner will also give you a direction arrow. If the direction arrow suggests that the glucose is rising rapidly or falling rapidly, then it can be safer to also do a finger prick test in those situations. Applying a Libre sensor is extremely straightforward. This step-by-step guide is taken from the Freestyle Libre website and is very easy to follow. Also, if you Google how to insert a Libre sensor, there are numerous videos which you can watch which will take you through the process. If you're still having difficulties, then please just get in touch with one of the DOT team in the office and we'd be happy to help. The official guidance from Abbott, the manufacturers of Freestyle Libre 2, is that if you or your child is suffering from a skin reaction secondary to wearing their sensor, then they should discontinue using the sensor. We have had some experience of families who've been really keen to persevere despite the fact that the child has been suffering from some skin reactions. In these situations, options that we can try are to use a thin adhesive dressing which sits between the skin and the sensor can be inserted through this dressing. There are also topical steroid ointments, sprays and tapes which can be used to settle down skin reactions once they have occurred. If this is something that you are affected by, then please get in touch with the DOT team and we'd be happy to advise you about what might work for you. When you're first starting out using flash glucose scanning, it's important for you to make a decision about what device you're going to use as your scanner. You can use the handset provided by the manufacturers, or you can install the Libre Link app on a smartphone and use that to scan. We do find that using one device to scan makes it a lot more simple to collate the information and to share the data than if you're using multiple devices. So that would be our recommendation. Downloading the app is free, and It's suitable for Apple phones or Android phones, any smartphone. Once you've downloaded the app, you're taken through a series of very simple steps to register as a user. You will need an email address for doing so. You will also be prompted to register for a Libre View account, which is a separate account, and that's how you will review your day-to-day data and share data with the team. If you're having any trouble downloading the app, then get in touch with the team and we're happy to take you through the steps needed. One of the popular features of Libre 2 with our families is the option to install the Linkup app on parents' phones. This means that when your child is at school or out and about or doing exercise and they scan their scanner, then you will also receive a notification on your smartphone that your child has done so and what the reading has been. You can also set alarms so that you're notified of low or high readings. If this sounds appealing to you, then you must use your own smartphone to install the Libre Linkup app on your phone, and it looks like this red picture here. You will need to make yourself an account using your personal details and your email address. Then go into your child's account and choose Connected Apps. Select Libre Linkup and put in your email address. This will generate an email to you asking if you agree to become a follower of your child on Libre Linkup. If you accept this, then you will be set up and ready to go and receive notifications of your child's readings. The final thing that you must do to get up and running using the Libre system is to register for your Libre View account. And this is how yourselves and the DOT team can review data over time and make suggested changes to your day-to-day management. You're prompted to make a Libre View account if you're using the Libre Link app, but if you're using the handset, then you would have to go onto a computer to do so. If you're choosing to scan using a smartphone, then once you've made your account, all of the readings and data will be automatically Bluetoothed into your child's account. If you're using the handset, then it's important to intermittently, for example every 2 weeks, connect the handset to your computer using the cable and extract the data from the handset so that it will be available in the Libre View account. On the next slide, I'll talk to you about how to share this information with the DOT team. Sharing your child's data from Libre View with the DOT team is very straightforward. If you are using a smartphone as your primary device, then just click on Menu and then choose Connected Apps as shown in the first picture. From there, select Libre View and then the blue link which says Connect to a practice. When you get to that page, input the practice code as shown, 09466409. That will then connect you to the Diabetes Out There team, allowing us to review your child's glucose data from the hospital. If you are choosing to use the Libre handset as your primary device, then you will have set up your Libre View account on a computer. And this is a step-by-step guide for how to share data if this is how you are doing things. So from your Libre View homepage, go to the 3 lines at the top right-hand corner. That's the settings menu, and choose Account Settings. From this page, select My Practices, and then the pop-up will show, allowing you to input the practice ID. The number is the same as we showed you previously if you're using a smartphone. The code for the DOT Tayside team is 09466409. So if you input that in practice ID, you will then be connected to the DOT Tayside team for us to review data. If you're experiencing difficulties with installation of the Libre Link app, the Libre Linkup app, or with your Libre View account and data sharing, then we would encourage you to contact Abbott on their Digital Health Solutions telephone number as shown here. Here are some examples of the data that you will be able to see when you start using flash glucose scanning. On the left-hand side, you can see somebody that's using a smartphone. And when you scan, you will be told what your interstitial glucose reading is, but also what the trend is. You'll also be shown a graph of 8 hours worth of retrospective glucose readings. That's what's been happening with your glucose readings for the 8 hours before you've done the scan. If you go into the reports menu, then you can generate these other reports, including looking at things like your time in range and your time in hypoglycemia. But we're going to talk about that in our second part of this presentation. If you're using the handset, then you can generate very similar looking pictures with 8 hours worth of data. And it will also tell you things like how much battery life is remaining on the screen there. It's important to understand that flash glucose scanning is not the same as continuous glucose monitoring, in that data is only collected if there is interaction from the user, i.e. they swipe their scanner. For this reason, the alarm features are not overly useful for the primary user because when they are hypo, they will see that they're hypo when they do the scan. They will not be pre-warned of this. However, if you're using the follow-on app, it can be helpful for you to be informed that your child has been low, because that may allow you to make contact with them and make sure that they've remembered to do their finger prick and have their hypo treatment. As a starting point, we would recommend setting the hypo alarm to go off at 3.9 and below, and the hyper alarm at 14 and above, because these are extremes of readings and we would hope that they would prompt a finger prick test. When you install your follow-on app, if you do choose to set alarm limits, then you will be prompted to choose override do not disturb. And that means that if you turn your phone to silent, then you will still be able to receive the audible alarms if your child is low or high. I hope you found all of this information useful today. In Flash Glucose Scanning Part 2, the follow-on presentation to this one, we're going to go ahead and discuss two other important concepts. Firstly, interpretation of trend arrows and how you can potentially react to these to try and avoid low and high readings and to improve glycemic control day to day. We're also going to look a little bit more at Libre View and the different reports that you can generate from that. Sometimes it's possible to spot trends on Libre View, which may also mean that certain changes are indicated to your day-to-day management. So if you think that interpreting the data is something you would like to know a little bit more about, then please do proceed to watch the second part of this presentation. Thanks very much.